There we go.
Good morning, everyone. This is the Howard County House Delegation meeting. We do not currently have a quorum of senators here, but we are going to, we may we may have a quorum momentarily here. It looks like Senator Hester is logging on. Then it is a meeting of the Howard County Delegation, and we will be continuing the agenda from yesterday. We have 4 bills left. We are going to actually start with out of order. We have Ms. Arthurs here from the administration, and she is not able to stay too long. So we are going to start with the bills that we've been discussing with the administration. And those are Howard County 1424 and Howard County 1824. So let us begin with Howard County 1424. Members, Ms. Doring just sent around, or is sending around, you should have in your inbox just moments ago a revised amendment, a revised version of the amendment that I had shared previously with you and discussed. There are only 3 changes, so I can walk you through them very quickly. The first change, and I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I get the line number here. Okay, so the 3rd paragraph of the revised agenda, in the bill on page 2 in line 10.
Sorry,
Yes.
Madam Chair, can you say again where you are? Because I'm having trouble, like, you're looking at what amendment to what?
I'm looking at the revised amendment, my revised amendment, which Ms. Doring just emailed this morning. And in the bill, so we're in HOCO 1424.
Okay, so you're backing into the bill itself. Okay.
Okay, on page 2 in lines 10 and 11. This is the Howard County Executive, the Superintendent of Howard County Public Schools, and the Howard County Delegation jointly shall provide staff for the work group. As you all know, the Howard County Executive and the Howard County Public Schools each have thousands of full-time employees. We have 1 part-time employee. And we don't think it's realistic to expect Ms. Doring to be staffing this work group. So we're going to go ahead and remove the delegation from that. Ms. Terrassa, Delegate Terrassa, sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to look at, we're on 1424. And
Yes.
There's nothing in line 10 except the word that. So you're adding something, or where are you taking something out from?
So I'm on page 2 of HOCO 1424.
I apologize. Okay,
There you
thank you. Okay, thank you.
Yes, okay. So we're just removing, the Howard County delegations from staffing the work group. So that's one change. The second change is correcting a typo. So in the amendment, in 2, 3, 4, the 6th paragraph, which is item number 4, that reduction had been deduction in the previous draft, so it's just correcting a typo. And then the third change, which is the most substantive and part of what we discussed with the administration. I'm sorry, Delegate Terrassa, did you have a question on that?
I'm sorry, I'm very confused. So is it all of the amendment that you have, but these are additions to your amendment?
So what I am walking through now is what has changed in the revised amendment that you just received this morning. So we previously walked through the amendment that I had proposed. And we
Okay,
made 3 changes since then.
I'm assuming we don't have a delineated copy, but so it does all the things that your amendment says. And then whatever you're going through.
Yes, I am only discussing what has changed in the updated version of this amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. So the third and most substantive change, and this is where we've been working with the administration, there was concern about the workload of staffing 2 work groups running parallel with largely the same staff from the county. So what we have done is on page 3 of the bill, we are deleting section G, which is the preliminary report due on December 1st, 2024. We're removing that preliminary report completely and saying the report is due on December 1st, 2025. So when we get to Howard County 18, you'll see that's on a shorter time frame. So they're going to be focused on their work first, and the P3 work group will have more time to do their research and report back. So I would like to go ahead and move my amendment.
Second.
Okay. Okay, Delegate Terrassa.
So we're not considering the Wu Hester amendment.
Correct. The amendment that they had proposed was to combine the work groups, right? To make it one work group that would be looking at revenues as well as P3s. And we're keeping them separate and adjusting the timing of the reporting so that it's a more manageable process for the administration to staff.
Okay, and is that what everybody's agreed to, or that's what we're discussing now, is whether to go in that direction?
Delegate Terraza, yeah. I did speak with Senator Hester yesterday, even though she can't be here today. I did speak with her yesterday evening and said that she was in agreement in terms of how that was going to move forward. But when she joined.
But what about Dr. Chao Wu, like Delegate Wu?
Yeah, I think that's a good approach. Thank you for asking.
And I do think Senator Hester's on her phone. I don't know if she's able to hear us or speak at the moment.
You can't unmute.
Me, okay.
So
Okay.
just for whatever it's worth, I still think we should be combining these. But I don't know that anybody agrees with me, so here we are.
Okay, I can speak to why I think it's important to keep them separate. One is the subject matter and making sure that P3s are not mistakenly looked at as a source of funding. The other is we have a much more diverse group of stakeholders looking at the revenue discussion, because we want to make sure that everyone, that every sector that's receiving transfer tax revenue is part of that discussion. And we didn't think it was necessarily the best use of all of their time to get into studying P3s for school construction. So that was the rationale. I understand you may not agree, but that's the rationale.
Fine. I've got it. Thank you.
Okay. Delegate Wu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So on your amendment, the last one, number 10, can we add not only constructed but renovated being included? Because renovation had been a huge problem in terms of funding. So can we include that, not only constructed?
Schools. So simply add schools constructed or renovated?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. I'll accept that as friendly.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This question, I guess, is both for you or Ms. Arthur. I'm fine with your explanation about why we're keeping these two separate. What I'm interested in is how the administration envisions the information from the two coming together, right? So knowing what our revenue sources are, why we're falling short, how we can best capture the revenues that we need seems in the end to be tied to whether it becomes important to finance things up front through a PP3, P3, so that we can advance multiple projects at one time, or whether it's too costly in the long run to take that approach. But somehow they should be, the two studies are related, right? In terms of how we move forward and if we change significantly what we do in terms of capital projects in the school system. So the question, I guess, for Ms. Arthur is two different reports, two different groups. How does that get digested and put together?
Delegate Hill, thank you for that question. And actually, I do think that the opportunity for one group and one study to take place first would help inform the recommendations of the second. So having the groups not necessarily run concurrently and being able to look at the findings and the study produced by the first could definitely help frame the discussion so that they're not necessarily two. Well, there will be two different conclusions because one will be focused on revenue generation. The other is more of a funding mechanism, but the information and the recommendations found within the first will be able to likely help inform the second.
Thank you.
Oh, Delegate Terrassa, you had your hand up, but put it down. Is that correct?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, okay. All right. Is there any further discussion or questions on the amendment? Okay, Ms. Dorrant, can you please call the vote?
Yes. Senator Lamb?
Yeah.
Delegate Feldmark?
Yes.
Senator Gazzone? Senator Hester?
Yes.
Delegate Atterbury? Delegate Gazzone?
Yes.
Delegate Hill?
Yes.
Delegate Terraza?
Yes.
Delegate Watson? Delegate Wu?
Yes,
Delegate Ziegler?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Okay. And then we have POCO 14 as amended. Is there a motion?
I move.
Second.
Any additional discussion or questions? All right, seeing none, Ms. Dorrant, can you please call the vote?
Senator Lamb?
Yes.
Delegate Feldmark?
Yes.
Senator Gazzone? Senator Hester? Delegate Atterbury? Delegate Gazzone?
Yes.
Delegate Hill?
Yes.
Delegate Terraza?
For the reasons that we've discussed before, I don't support P3s, and I worry that looking at them will highlight them as a means to an end that I don't think we should be pursuing, so my vote's no.
Delegate Watson? Delegate Wu?
Yes,
Delegate Ziegler?
Yes.
Senator Hester, able to?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Thank you.
the motion passes.
Okay, thank you. Now, moving on to Howard County 1824. You have two amendments to Howard County 1824. One from Senator Lamb and one that I had worked on with Delegate Wu. What I would like to do is, before I actually move the amendment, discuss taking one element of Senator Lamb's to incorporate into the amendment that Delegate Wu and I did. The bill as drafted says 2 members of the House of Delegates who represent Howard County appointed by the delegation, and Senator Lamb's amendment corrects that to be 1 member from the House and 1 member from the Senate. So that's the first paragraph of Senator Lamb's amendment. So we want to insert that into the other amendment. And then with that addition, Delegate Tarasa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So can you tell me what that now does? I have a bill that I've marked up with both amendments and with the other bill. And so what is this, what bills is this combining, and what does this amendment do? I see the list of membership, so you don't have to go over the whole thing because I can see the list of membership. but-
Sure. So so we're changing you want me to just walk through what this combined amendment would do? Is that?
Well, I understand what you're adding from, well, whatever you want to do, but I understand what you're adding from Senator Lamb's bill and amendment, and I support that. What I don't quite understand is what your amendment, Dr. Wu, and your amendment do to the whole bill, and what bills it's combining.
Okay, so so there's the changes to membership. And you said you don't need me to walk through those, correct? Okay. So then it expands the scope of what the work group or task force, I apologize, will be looking at. So instead of simply looking at transfer tax and propose reallocation of transfer tax revenues, in consultation with the Howard County Public Schools, Howard County Department of Finance, and Howard County Budget Office, the task force shall identify the capital needs of the school system through 2035, the projected funding expected to be allocated to school system capital projects through 2035, and any anticipated funding gaps for those capital projects under current revenue projections through, and actually, Mr. Babich, I just realized a typo that I had not realized earlier. In Romanet 3, the amendment actually says revenue projects. It should be revenue projections, if you can please make that correction. So looking at the capital budget, projects, the needs from the school system, the funding that is available and projected and available, and any gaps under current revenue projections. And then study options for closing any identified funding gaps. And so that would include a potential reallocation of the transfer tax, enacting a commercial excise tax. So that does pull in a study of what Howard County 1324 had proposed to enable. Exercising existing authority the county may use to generate additional revenue, and other potential revenue sources the task force determines appropriate to study. So it's not just looking at transfer tax, it's expanding the scope of what they consider. Then the task force makes recommendations by October 31st. And then if the council, looking at those recommendations, if there are things that the council wants to pursue that are not within the county's existing authority, then they would request state authority, state legislation to authorize whatever mechanisms they think are needed.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
Does this include deferred maintenance?
That would be, I believe, part of the capital needs of the school system that they're looking at.
Okay, that it's
Oh.
really important to me. So if we need to clarify that somewhere, I think we should be looking at future capital needs for new construction plus deferred maintenance.
I agree.
Would you like to, in F1, Romanet 1, where we're asking them to identify the capital needs of the school system, say the capital needs, including deferred maintenance?
That would make me really happy. Thank you.
Okay. I consider that friendly.
So, sorry.
Delegate Taras. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know Delegate Hill's hand's been up, but I just want to know if somebody can send me a copy of this, because all I have for this amendment is, I guess,
The
it's like
notes.
yeah, the notes or Word documents. So I don't, and I'm
Sure.
Are you in office? I can print one, share with you.
yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
the notes were shared before the draft was available. The draft came out, I think, yesterday morning. So, but we can resend it. We
The
can
draft
resend
is-
it.
Teresa, are you in office?
No,
The-
Okay, so I couldn't print.
The
I
draft-
have
I'm gonna
to forward
just-
that to you.
The draft is available on the drive.
I'm looking for it on the drive, and I don't know if I'm just not connected right because I'm now on 2 computers, but I can't
Okay.
access.
I'll resend the link to the drive folder with specifically the one with the amendments in it to the delegation right now, just in case anybody needs it.
Okay, could you also send a copy of this amendment?
It's
Bye.
dated, it's dated 2/7, Jen, so look in the date.
I understand
Oh,
that, but I'm
okay.
just telling you for the
Yeah,
interest
you
of
gotta look
time.
in yesterday's photo.
Okay, I can't access it right now. I'm trying to operate on 2 computers.
I emailed you.
Thank you.
Okay, Delegate Hill.
Yes, Madam Chair, I just want to clarify that if this amendment is adopted, then we would not need to, or Senator or Chairman Lamb would remove his amendment for consideration. And if we were to adopt this amendment onto the bill and adopt the bill with this amendment, we would not need to consider 1324. Is that what the sequencing
That-
would be?
That is, yes, that is in, this revised amendment is intended to both incorporate what Senator Lamb was addressing in his amendment, and Senator Lamb's chief of staff did meet with
I just
me
want to make sure
with
that for the public,
with
that
the
the
administration
sequencing,
tomorrow. Yes,
right, that the
right,
sequencing
and then
is clear so
the
that
commercial.
we won't have to go through the others because that bill will have been incorporated into this one.
Yes, now to be clear, it is not exactly what that bill did, right? That Howard County 1324 was enabling a commercial excise tax. And this is asking the task force to study the commercial excise tax as part of their purview.
Thank you for the clarification. And I move the question on the amendment
Okay,
with Senator Hester's clarifications.
yes, and yes. Okay, Ms. Doran, can you please call the vote on the revi, oh, I'm sorry, Delegate Gazzoni, did you have a question before we vote?
Yes, thanks. Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to make sure, because I don't think that we walked through the second part of the of Senator Lamb's amendment that we were wrapping in to your amendment. And I don't necessarily feel strongly about that, but I just wanted to check on that.
So we're, well, and thank you for clarifying. We're only pulling in the first paragraph
Okay.
of Senator Lamb's amendment. The rest of his amendment was also modifying the membership.
So it's already reflected.
Which is already, right, and Senator Lamb was in agreement with the membership as laid out in the other amendment, as long as we fixed that delegation issue.
Thank you very much. I hadn't had an opportunity to track one-to-one to see if that had all happened, so I appreciate that.
Sure. Delegate Tarasa.
Just a clarification and maybe an amendment. It seems to me that the House delegation member should be appointed by the House delegation and the Senate delegation member should be appointed by the Senate delegation.
I'm fine with that. Senator Lamb, any objection to that?
No, that's fine.
Okay,
Okay, so that's a friendly amendment.
so we'll take that in as well.
Thank you.
Yes. Delegate Kazoni, is your hand still up or up again? Okay. All right, any other questions or comments before we take up this amendment? This revised amendment? Okay, Ms. Doran, can you please call the vote?
Senator Lamb,
Yes.
Delegate Feldmark,
Yes.
Senator Gazone, Senator Hester,
Yes.
Delegate Atterbury, Delegate Gazone,
Yes.
Delegate Hill,
Yes.
Delegate Terraza,
Yes.
Delegate Watson, Delegate Wu,
Yes, I want to thank the chair, Madam Chair, put a lot of effort to make the amendment much better than originally scoped. Thank you very much.
and Delegate Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. Great. Moving on. Howard County 424.
My apologies, Madam Chair, but I
Yes.
thought I may have just blanked. I apologize, but I thought we just did the amendment.
You are correct. Thank you.
Okay.
We need to, it just felt like such an accomplishment. I'm sorry. All right. Ms. Doring, let me ask, is there any additional discussion on the bill as amended? Okay. Ms. Doring, can you please call the vote on the bill as amended?
Senator Lamb,
Yes.
Delegate Feldmark,
Yes.
Senator Gazone, Senator Hester,
Yes.
Delegate Atterbury, Delegate Gazone,
Yes.
Delegate Hill,
Yes.
Delegate Terraza,
Yes, and thank you to the chair for all her work on this.
Delegate Watson. Oops, sorry.
Sorry, no.
Delegate Wu,
Yes.
Delegate Ziegler.
Yes.
The motion passes.
All right. Thank you. And now on to Howard County 424,
Great.
Delegate Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So worked with Delegate Wu and Delegate Terrasa to try and simplify the language and take out portions that were problematic. And Mr. Babich has, I believe, something that we can share. Maybe, is that the best way, Mr. Babich, to share it or to
I just
add,
received the document. Do you want me to
Okay.
send it out to the delegation?
if you can?
Okay, just a minute.
So in essence, there were a couple of concerns. One was with, let me pull it up, with on page 3, I believe, section 11B-113.7 that talked about the community associations documents having to reflect certain language, and the reality is that it's really hard for them to change any of their documents because of the quorum required. So one of the things we've done is just completely remove that section. The second change is that there was concern that while the Columbia Association documents talk about rights of the employees of commercial tenants, it was pointed out and reinforced that the village and town center documents don't recognize residents in the same way, and their documents are specific for voting rights. So the first change, and probably the most significant one, is to clarify that residential tenants under this legislation would be entitled or be required, or the landlords will be required to give them information about their rights, privileges under their living on CA liened paying property. And residential leaseholders would also be needed to be given a link to or a copy of whatever the governing documents are for the village in which that property is located. But the commercial leaseholders would only be required to give their commercial tenants the information about the Columbia Association governing documents and what rights and privileges their employees are entitled to per Columbia Association, since the villages and town center generally do not give rights and privileges to employees of commercial property. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you. Ms.
then
Doran,
we'll-
can you please also put the amendment up on the screen if you can share it? Got a couple of requests for that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Delegate Hill. I thought you were done and then I may have cut you off.
Okay.
I
And then
apologize.
the final piece had to do with the subtraction modification, and there was a suggestion of
There's not
rewriting
from there.
the component that referred to tenants or renters who explicitly through their lease are paying part of that subtraction or part of that lien to Columbia Association. And in consultation with Mr. Babbage, it seemed that the proposed change in the language is probably not as consistent with statutory language requirements as the language that's there. And he and I both believe that the language that is in the document is pretty clear, that only tenants on a, under a lease where there is explicit payment or contribution to the CA lien would be entitled to the subtraction modification, and it would only be based on what their proportion in payment to that lien is. And it's clear that if their contract does not explicitly state it, they're not, and it's only the homeowners who would be granted the subtraction modification. So we think the language is clear about that. And that's all I had to say about the changes.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Go ahead, Senator Hester.
Thank you. So my question is for the bill sponsor. Were you able to connect with Senator Gazzoni? He had a question about the subtraction modification. I don't know exactly what the question was, but I was just curious if you or Tyler were able to connect with him or his office.
I was
And if
not,
this,
I was
okay.
not aware that he had a question. I did not get a call or an email indicating that we needed to talk.
So I want to, Delegate Terrasa also had her hand up, so I want to recognize her, and then we can go back to what I believe is most likely Senator Gazzoni's concern about the subtraction modification. But go ahead, Delegate Terrasa.
So I know I spoke with a sponsor and Delegate Wu for a while last night, but I'm confused about what actually the bill does now, because my understanding is that it was just going to do the information piece, and then there was a small piece at the end that gave the tenants the subtraction modification if it's explicitly written in their lease. But that would make a lot of sense to me, because the lien payers now aren't able to do the lien payers now are not able to do a subtraction modification. So I don't know why we would only give it to tenants who have it in there.
We don't only give it, it also states the homeowner gets it. It just clarifies that if a tenant is entitled, they're only entitled to the portion that they're paying, and it has to be specified in the lease that they're getting it. The bill as introduced specified that the homeowner is entitled to the subtraction modification. It simply had clarifications of the rare situation where a tenant could be entitled to that same thing. But the bill says resident means homeowner, or a tenant if in the lease the tenant is paying the subtraction modification. I mean, is paying a portion of the lien.
Okay, well, I guess the way I think leases work is residential leases work is they cover whatever cost the person renting out the unit has plus an amount for their own, or above that to make it profitable to them to lease out an apartment.
Again, there are people write leases different ways, just like in a commercial lease,
know.
you can have triple net leases and other ones, and sometimes things are specified or not. And it may be a rare situation that that the landlord would specify that, but what I would not want is for someone to have that and then they have an issue about who's entitled to the tax break. And to me, it's analogous to if, you know, there are two people who share custody, and one's entitled, you know, there's a determination of who's entitled to take the child tax credit, right? And that's determined by, so in the same way, and I think you're right, the vast majority of cases, the tenants would not be entitled to it, only the homeowner would be. But in those rare cases where they have leases, and it would have to be a lease that specifies in writing that the tenant is actually contributing to that. So I didn't want to exclude that rare case simply to try and write a bill that only considers the overwhelming majority of cases.
Okay, and I guess I'm concerned about that piece. It sounds like Chairwoman Feldmark might have something before we get to that piece.
So I did want to just really quickly, as I'm listening to this conversation, I guess my concern would be all residential tenants are paying that lien in their rent, whether it's spelled out explicitly in their lease or not. So it seems strange to me to give that differing benefit based on how the lease is written. And I think we would just be discouraging anyone from ever spelling that out explicitly in a lease if it had tax implications, right? So, but I do want to recognize Delegate Wu.
Let me
his hand
respond
raised.
to that.
Hang on just a second. Delegate Wu has had his hand raised for a while.
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. First, I want to thank you, Delegate Hill and Delegate Teresa last night to work this out. I think there are two, offer the revision. I think that we just try to remove a lot of confusion from audience, and they send me text message right now. So the first one, we only focus on, we ask the landlord to provide document or link to a document or digital copy of document to renters about their rights or the complaint from CA or individual village, if applicable. And for some properties in CA, actually they do not belong to any village. So they're very complex situation there. I just want to highlight that. So I hope that language can reflect that situation. And
It does.
yeah, right. So the second part, because we said if applicable, right? If they're in the village association. So for the other part, I agree. It's a little complex. I'm trying to figure out a good language about the tax reduction. Delegate here, is that right? Because when you said reduction, I already did tax reduction.
So subtraction. Right.
Yeah, or
So let me,
subtraction.
So
if I may, because we keep
Yeah.
going.
Delegate Hill, please briefly.
Thank you. So the point is that in the beginning of the bill, it talks about different kinds of lease agreements. It talks about lease agreements where there is no explicit reference to the rent covering the lien. Okay, and ones where it does, because both exist. And so in those cases where the lease does, and I don't think it's of issue whether if this were to pass, future landlords never explicitly state it, that's fine. But if they do explicitly state it, which some leases do, then those people, if a subtraction modification were to be given, the people who are explicitly being told you're contributing to the lien, when the lien goes up, your rent's going to go up, they should be entitled because they're being told they're explicitly paying for it, and people who aren't being explicitly paid for it, and it's just being bundled in with mortgage payments and water and sewer and whatever else, there's nothing for them to go to their tax accountant to say, I'm entitled to this, because there's nothing in the lease. So it really is just consistent if you have a lease that explicitly states it, and by some stroke of luck, Maryland decides we're going to treat it like it's a local tax instead of a homeowner's fee, then if your lease says you're paying that, then you should be entitled to that modification just as the homeowner who is paying it is. That's
Okay.
essentially what it does.
Okay, Delegate Terrasa, is your hand up again, or is that left up? Go ahead.
Okay, so I have a number of questions. First of all, first of all, I'll say this and then we can come back to it. I'm not sure what the rest of the bill is doing at this point.
I can tell you.
Wait, let me just finish. So I do want to understand what remains in this bill from the first part, but in terms of the income tax modification, which I know folks have wanted to do for many, many years, and which I completely support because I believe Columbia operates like a city, even if it's not a city. I find this part very confusing, and I'm not even sure how I would vote on this part, because I
So
definitely.
why not amend it? Why don't you ask to amend it out? I'm sure there's plenty of votes who would take it out.
Let me
You can
also
amend it out.
let me offer just for a moment. I think I believe and I believe this is probably the concern that Senator Hester was referring to, that I would expect the chair of budget and tax to have, is this is going to have a very, very large fiscal note. And I don't think it is
I'm
realistic
asking if you all
in
want
the
to
current,
amend it out, then just
in
amend it
the
out.
current landscape. And I guess, you know, I don't know, I don't recall if this amendment has been moved and seconded.
It has not.
Okay.
So if
I
you want
don't
to add to this
think,
amendment that we take
Delegate
that
Hill, I'm
section out,
speaking,
take the
please.
section
Can
out.
you, Delegate Hill,
Yes, Madam
Please.
Chair. Just take it out.
Delegate Hill, please let me finish. I will share now that I'm personally not comfortable supporting this bill at this time, with or without this amendment.
And I'm going to move the
so,
bill
Ms.
with
Delegate
the-
Hill, can please let me speak.
I'm waiting.
Okay, so I'm happy to entertain a motion on either the amendment or the bill. Is there a motion?
There is a motion to accept Delegate Terrasa's suggestion to
I am
remove
not
the
putting
section.
that in. I'm sorry.
I am going to move
Okay.
to take my amendment, which
Are you moving your amendment?
with
Okay.
then the additional deletion of this final section on subtraction modification, what the bill will then do is be sure that renters get information about their status if they are residential renters as being entitled to a particular privileges under Columbia Association. And if they are residential renters, the governing documents of the village or town center they live in, if they live in a village or town center. Commercial tenants would get information about their status under Columbia Association. They do not have a status under the villages, so that they do not get any village information, just what Columbia Association says that their employees are entitled to. And that would be the entire bill.
There is a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. There is a motion and a second. Delegate Wu, is this for discussion on the amendment?
I think Delegate Teresa raised her hand first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't
Delegate
think you, but
Teresa.
thank you. Okay, so two questions about this, because I do support us giving information to tenants about their rights. And maybe in future years we can refine that even more. But what two questions I have is, who informs the tenant, the commercial employees? And two, I believe, but maybe some of my other Columbia friends can correct me, the town center is a village. And so I think it's confusing to also have the term town center.
The term town center was worked out with the bill drafter because there is some disagreement about, so it was better to make clear.
So the disagreement is about downtown?
No, town center has said they are not a village at times, that they are an entity, but not a village. And so that's how that language came about. We're not talking about the part of downtown Columbia, which you have been very good about educating, that is not part of any village, any town center. It is a standalone. That is not included in this.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification.
Okay.
So then,
and the answer is that the landlord, in whether it's commercial or residential, is the one who would be responsible for providing either a copy of the documents that are Columbia Association, or a link to the documents that are Columbia Association, okay? Or, so that's what so they sign a lease, you're a tenant, just like in a homeowner's closing situation. At closing, you get the documents. When you're signing the lease, by the way, if it's commercial, because you're leasing on this property, Columbia Association has this thing that says your employees on this site are entitled to be considered residents for the purposes of discounts, or whatever it is Columbia decides now or in the future.
okay.
That commercial lease property employees are entitled to.
Okay, but I just want to clarify, because again, I support this part and would support the other part, but I can't the way it is right now. But
that's why we took it out.
Right, I understand, but the employee, I thought they still spoke to employees, and the landlord may have no relationship to it.
No, the landlord doesn't tell the employee. They tell the leaser, the tenant, that what their employees are entitled. They just tell them that your employees are entitled to. It's up to we're not talking about what an employer tells their employees. And the landlord is not responsible for telling the employees. They tell the tenant about what the tenant's employees are entitled or are considered under Columbia Association documents. Does that make sense?
Well, it makes sense. It's not, what's here right now, but if to the extent that all this does is require the landlord to inform tenants of the rights they have under the as residents of the Columbia Association and perhaps what village they live in, then I can support that. I just like that's not what's here yet.
I think it is.
Okay. Okay.
It says,
Delegate Wu.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I think now the bill with the amendment Delegate Hill provided dramatically reduce the scale, right? So just make sure everybody on the same page. Now we only focus on inform the landlord need to inform the tenant about the complaint about CA or the village they're located, the village complaint. That's all, right? And
correct.
it may be a physical copy or digital copy or link to the complaint. Can be very simple. Just but because sometimes a lot of renters or tenants are not aware of this. I think this will definitely give them that information. How they deal with that, that's their own business. But we want to both CA or individual village association, where that kind of information will be shared with the tenant. I think that's the intention of the bill right now.
That's correct. And the other parts that you all have raised good questions about have been removed. It's a disclosure bill only.
Yeah.
If the amendment is accepted.
And to clarify, it's a disclosure to the tenant,
To the tenant,
commercial or residential, not to
commercial or
the,
residential.
not to the employee, because I thought when we spoke last night, we were going to strike a lot of the bill, and I'm not seeing it in this amendment, but maybe it is stricken.
I think you're missing the section. If it says, okay. I think what you have to look above when it says in the first section, under the terms of a lease, let me see, that's not the first section, the.
28,
yes.
thanks for
Okay.
scrolling down. It takes out 7 through 28. And are there any other references to employees?
The only reference to employees is it says, on page 2, okay. A landlord shall use a written lease that includes for a residential lease, that the tenant as a resident of real property that is subject, the rights of the tenant as is based on there being a resident of real property that is subject to Columbia Association covenants. And in the case of a commercial lease, and again, this is what the landlord shall have in the lease, the tenant's employees, right? For a commercial lease, it informs the tenants that the tenant's employees assigned to the site, right? It tells them what their own employee, the landlord tells the tenant of the rights that the tenant's employees are entitled to as employees of a commercial entity that is located on a site that is subject to Columbia Association covenants and governing documents.
Okay,
Is
thank
that-
you. Yeah,
Right.
I'm assuming we could vote on it as you've explained. Whether I can see whether it does that or not, I assume we are voting on what Delegate Hill just said.
With the additional removal of the subtraction modification section. Right? So the amendment offered today takes out both 11 3, I think it was, and also the 10 -207. So it takes out 11B-113.7. It takes out 10.-207, and it has the Delegate Wu's and language about the digital or a link to a digital copy, and it specifies that the commercial lease need only tell them about Columbia Association relationship, nothing about any relationship to the village. That makes sense. The residential lease, you get information about Columbia Association and you get information about the village that you're located in, if you're in a village.
Mr. Babbage, are you keeping up in terms of drafting for preparing?
I think I've got everything. I've actually put together some of the technical details won't be there, but I've got a draft in progress following the
Okay.
conversation. I
I'm-
can if Rebecca turns off hers, I can put my screen on,
So-
or I just emailed the draft to Rebecca. Okay.
Okay, let's hear from Delegate Gazzoni then.
Yeah, I just looking at it from a slightly different way for clarification for myself. My understanding is that I get the 11B 13.7. I'm assuming that the entirety of section 2 is being taken out. And section 3 and 4 are going to be modified to reflect that we took out the entirety of section 2.
Section 2 is being removed in its entirety, and yes, 3 and 4 would be modified. Just like the technical language at the beginning would be modified.
Okay, and the entire part about it's at least in my version on page 3, line 9, the 11B-13.7, that's all coming
Correct.
out also.
That's all coming out, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And all of page 4, right?
Yes, that's section 2.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Babbage, can you walk us through where we stand?
Sure. So we're just going through it as standing, as usual, technical changes to the first part of the amendment, or first part of the bill rather. And then starting on page 2, mostly some technical changes to this subsection D, just to reorganize it a little bit. And then effectively this paragraph 2 is being replaced by this E, which includes the requirement for the landlord to provide a residential tenant a copy of the covenant and governing documents of Columbia, as well as covenant of the appropriate village association. And then for a commercial lease tenant, the landlord has to provide just a copy of the covenant of Columbia, clarifying that the copy could be a physical copy, digital copy, or a link to a digital copy. This provision here strikes 11B 113.7 in its entirety, and the changes to 10207 in their entirety. So this is 11B 113.7 is the lease notification requirement, and then the village association changes, and then 10207 is the subtraction modification. So that's this portion getting removed, this portion getting removed, and then accordingly some technical changes to section 3 and 4, since they some of it's not necessary anymore.
Okay. So I'm gonna ask a question, and I think this is probably for Mr. Babbage. Are there other instances where state law regulates a business differently based on a private covenant?
So I do know there are some instances where specifically the Columbia Association is allowed to be governed differently, and it's not.
No, I'm not
considered
talking about governing the Columbia Association differently.
Mhm.
I'm talking about, because what we're doing here, I know we've done over the years, lots of legislation that carves out specific things about the Columbia Association or Columbia Village Associations. But this is not legislating what they do. This is legislating what a business or a property owner is required to do because of a private covenant on their land. And that's my question.
It's a specific of enough of a scenario that I just can't speak to it.
Okay.
And I haven't drafted a lot in the sort of area of these covenants and
Okay.
businesses within it, unfortunately. I can do my
Okay.
best to look into it. but-
Delegate Terrassa, you raised your hand. I don't know if you have a specific
So is
example
your,
or answer.
well, I think we do, but I can't say with any
Can I-
certainty. Is your concern that the two sections are different somehow? Like, I don't know why, like, we could just say the same.
No, my concern is if I own a house in an out parcel
Right,
and rent it out, I'm not required to share information. But if I own a house on a parcel that is subject to CPRA, I now have,
yeah, I mean,
as a
here's,
landlord, a different requirement. And I'm not,
yeah,
I'm concerned about not only do we do that, but can we do that?
This is disclosure. You're not requiring them to do something.
You're
other than-
requiring disclosure.
Correct. Other than to tell them that it's sort of like when you live in a homeowners association, they require, right, that you have, like I said, the owners, the current statute requires certain things to be given at closing. And among the things you're required to give at closing are, if you're part of a homeowners association, are the information about the homeowners association.
And that's required everywhere across the state. Now
Yes.
we're saying if your land is subject to this private covenant with this village or this or CA, right? Now you have a different state legal requirement.
Actually, I think what we're
okay.
doing is clarifying, that just as if you were part of, if you were owning in a homeowners association, they would have to give you that when you buy the property, that even though Columbia Association isn't a homeowners association, right? That at closing, the owners would get the information. And we're saying that tenants, because Columbia Association gives them certain rights, they have a right to know that. And
I
would say that
understand.
if-
I'm not
and I would
arguing-
say that if it were, at a something outside of Columbia Association, and the tenants get certain rights because they're part of a HOA somewhere, that those tenants are also entitled to that. And that if we haven't done it, we should be saying across the board that tenants have a right to know what their rights are if they belong, if they get rights simply by virtue of residing under some entity. So if we don't do this, we should be doing it for tenants all around the state.
Okay, and I'm comfortable with
Delegate
this.
Terrassa, yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm comfortable with this because I know we treat owners and HOAs differently all the time, in that they're required to have these enclosing documents, all of their HOA. So when I sold my house, I had to have HOA, my information from my individual HOA and also my village and CA. So this is just extending that right of information to a tenant. I'm not sure I see the distinction you're making between this.
Every property owner subject to an HOA has the same disclosure requirements at
Right.
closing statewide, right? What we're doing now is saying property owner, you now have, if you choose to lease out your property, right? You now have a different set of requirements because of a private covenant on your land. And the specific private covenant on your land. So I don't,
But you do that anyway when you sell. Like, what's the difference?
May I?
the difference is everyone everywhere is required to disclose covenants on their property. Now we're saying only if your covenant happens to be with CA or a village, there's an extra step when you lease it out, right? Because this is not legislating CA or the villages. This is legislating individual property owners,
I got you.
right?
Okay.
And I wonder about the legality of it.
So-
Right, because we're treating
Chair?
property owners differently based on a private agreement.
Is the covenant public record?
Yes. The covenant's public record.
Right? So we're not disclosing anything private. It's a public record.
No, it's not, it's not about, my
Okay.
concern is not about, I mean, look, I don't think anyone on this meeting can answer the legal question.
Mhm.
Delegate Tarasi, you raised your hand again.
No, I was just nodding. I do understand the distinction you're making. I am not concerned about that for the purpose of voting, but certainly the committee may get some additional, I'm comfortable with the information piece, requiring the information to be shared. It doesn't mean everybody has to be, but I just am.
All right, Mr. Babich.
This isn't a concrete answer, but I can say I checked with the bill file in the original drafter. This was not raised as a concern of legality at all. And I trust that they would have probably flagged it, but I can continue looking into it to try and get a more sure answer for you.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm willing to entertain a sort of straw poll vote for purposes of the filing deadline, but I'd like to hold off and get an actual legal answer on that before we do a final position.
Like to call the vote then, Niska.
Okay.
Is this all
Ms.
the amendment?
Doran, can you call
So
this?
just to be clear, am I calling the vote on the amendment right now?
Yes, and
or-
this is just a straw poll vote.
Okay.
I mean, it's just
Senator
a straw
Lamb?
poll. We don't have to do a formal call. Our
Oh,
folks,
okay.
I'm asking delegation members now.
The amendment or the
who is-
amendment?
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry. Can we do a vote on the amendment formally? I
We
understand.
can vote on the amendment formally, yes.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. All right, can you, Ms. Doran, can you
Yes.
please call the vote on the amendment?
On the amendment. Okay. Senator Lamb?
We're just the House delegation now.
Oh, okay. Excuse me. Sorry. Delegate Felmark,
Yes.
Delegate Atterbury, Delegate Kazone,
Yes.
Delegate Hill,
Yes.
Delegate Terraza,
Yes.
Delegate Watson, Delegate Wu,
Yes.
Delegate Ziegler.
Yes.
The motion passes in the House.
Madam Chair,
Delegate Hill.
I would like to call a vote, understanding that there's a legal question that you would like, but I'd like to have a formal vote from the House delegation on the bill as amended. And I understand you'll be seeking legal clarification before a letter of support comes out, assuming that the Senate votes it through as amended. But if it's a straw, we have to come back. So I'd
Can we
like,
wait?
I'm gonna ask for a straw poll vote. I understand
what does that technically do?
it lets us know. I mean,
But you said we
but
don't have to.
here's what I want to know. I
You
want to
said we
know.
don't have to go through the roll call. So when you say
Right.
straw, I want to be clear. I'm asking for a strong roll call vote, so we know if we have the numbers for it to go through if the legal question is clarified. Not just a show of hands vote.
We would have to vote anyway. So, can I'm asking delegation members for a show of hands on if this is legal, how many folks are planning to, are comfortable with this bill as it stands now? Okay, all right. Then we will go ahead and drop it. And we will ask for a verification that we have, that there's no legal issue with putting this obligation on based
So
on
do we
based
need-
on the private covenant.
So if you clarify for me, do we need to have a roll call vote of the House delegation for this to move forward?
To get the letter of support, yes.
Can we go ahead and do that now? We've done that in the past where we've taken the vote with the stipulation that if
Right.
something didn't happen, that it would not go through
I am not, I'm not
because you
taking
don't
that
want it to
vote now
go.
because I want to understand the legal issues first.
But to clarify, it's
No.
gonna get filed. It just won't get.
It will
as
get
much
filed. It won't have a letter of support yet.
Until we vote.
Okay, so we will then come back once the legal question is clarified and we'll decide whether then to support it as it's coming to committee.
will.
Is that, I just want to understand the
We will.
process.
We will file the bill so it is not late and we will get additional information and we will take it from there. Delegate Terasa, it was not a hand.
I don't know
Okay.
what take it from
All
there.
right,
means. Could you
we
specify,
got
clarify,
13
what does
minutes.
take it from there mean? Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'm asking the
Yes.
question you have not answered a
have-
couple of times. When you get legal clarification, will it come
Right.
back on the agenda for discussion and a possible revote, or will it not come back up? That's what I'm asking. What is the
Oh,
plan?
no, I'm sorry. I misunderstood. Yes, we will. Well, let me say this. If there's a legal problem, I'm not sure we'll bring it back for a vote. If there's not a legal problem, then I'm happy to bring it back for a vote. But we'll
But if there's a
bring it
legal
back on the
problem, let's tell
agenda.
us. Right, okay, so we'll
It
find
will be back
out.
on the agenda. I can't guarantee we're gonna bring it to a vote because if the AG says
but
actually
at
no,
least
there's
be
an issue, then
disclosed.
I don't think we should, right.
Okay, but it'll at least be disclosed and discussed, and the
Yes.
information will be shared and discussed in the delegation.
Yes,
Thank you.
that
Okay.
is absolutely. All right,
I move to
Um,
adjourn.
take it. We will see you all on the floor. Take care. Bye.